Welcome to another episode of HCP Visits. Here is your host, Woody Watts.
Welcome to another episode from Hill City Paranormal. I'm your host, Woody Watts. For this episode, I'm hitting back into the archives for another classic episode of I Believe with Rick Rambleman. This one is one of my favorites. For those of you new to this podcast, I Believe was a late-night call-in show that we produced years ago, where true paranormal believers called in and shared their experiences. This episode, our host interviews the writer of The Day I Met Bigfoot. Keep in mind the I Believe phone number is no longer active, so if you have an experience you'd like to share, call our new number at 434-381-0242. And here is I Believe.
Welcome back, believers. I'm your host, Rick Rambleman, and this is I Believe with Rick Rambleman. Today, I am very excited about a caller we have lined up, but first I want to do something that's become something of a tradition here on the show, and that is to read messages from listeners. So we have Will from Tight Squeeze, Virginia, and had I not known that there really is a place called Tight Squeeze, Virginia, I would not have believed that that was a real town. In fact, it is not all that far from where we are, maybe less than an hour away from our studios. So Will from Tight Squeeze, real place, Virginia, writes, "Is your name Rick Rambleman because when you get viewer mail, you ramble on and on with your answer, making the show about you and not about your callers?" Okay, Will, I'm going to take that criticism as constructive criticism, take it to heart, and say thank you. Great. That out of the way, I am delighted to talk to our next caller. He is Craig Durham, and he is the author of the book, The Day I Met Bigfoot. So, Chet, I believe we have Craig on line one. Hello, Craig.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Welcome to the Believer Line.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're delighted to have you. I got your book in front of me. First thing I ask every caller is to simply state what they believe. So I'm going to ask you, Craig, what do you believe?
Well, after the experience that I had with a buddy of mine some time ago, I guess I could say now that I believe in Bigfoot.
And not only do you believe in it, you've written a book that I think you published this year. Is that correct?
Yes, this July 2018.
So it's The Day I Met Bigfoot by Craig Durham, and that's his. I read it and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the
awesome.
Both the Bigfoot encounter and then just the general adventure leading up to it and beyond, which I think a lot of people can relate to, being lost in the mountains and the sense of going out on a bike ride with a buddy and then something.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, as you probably read, it just kind of started off as a simple bike ride, and we were on vacation, so it was kind of an area that we weren't too familiar with. We'd never been there before, so yeah, just pretty much started off like that as a simple just bike ride, but obviously turned into a little bit more than that. And like you had mentioned, there's a lot more to the story that kind of goes along with this particular day. So yeah, the Bigfoot encounter is kind of
that's definitely the highlight. That is definitely the highlight.
It's definitely the highlight, but it did have kind of a real life altering change.
This encounter that you had, this was not something you went out looking for.
No, not at all. Like I said, this was kind of a freak thing. This was I don't think that I never went out looking for Bigfoot. This was just something that me and my buddy, like I said, we were just riding our bikes, and we were on vacation. We were helping my brother who was living in California at the time, helping him move. So we're coming from Boston. He just happened to have a couple mountain bikes that were lying around, so we hopped on the bikes, and kind of, like I said, just going for a little ride, and it definitely turned into something a little bit more.
Right. So you're at Mount Shasta in California, and you kind of almost purposely get yourself lost. You're just adventuring. Let's see where this trail leads, and the trail gets pretty narrow, I believe. Correct?
Right. I wouldn't go as far as say we purposely were doing it. So now when we're, again, this takes place in 1998. This is some time ago. So now, a friend of mine who's in the book with me. Now, when we would go mountain bike riding, or even just riding in the woods, see, we grew up next to I guess you could say woods. It's about as woods as you could get in the Boston area. It's probably 10 square miles or so. But as kids, we would go down there and even our BMX bikes and just ride around in the woods. So we were used to this area and some of the surrounding, the woods and forests around the area. But what happened is you could go riding around all day, and you end up, a trail ends up eventually on a street, or it seems like always typically behind like a shopping mall or some weird places that we would always recognize.
Some form of civilization.
So we would kind of, when we would figure out where we were. So we would kind of joke around and say, let's try to get lost. Back then in the area that we were kind of familiar with. So I think that was just something that was just so common that we never really found ourselves actually getting lost. So now, fast forward to when we're in California, we weren't purposely trying to get lost at that point, but we were just so used to just getting on the bikes and just enjoying riding around and just keep going. And I think, unfortunately, at this particular time, we weren't paying attention to really where we were going, so we ended up getting lost because of that.
Right. So you're in the woods, you have some trouble with the bike, and that's right about when you had the encounter.
Yes, exactly.
So talk me through what's going through your mind when that happens.
Well, basically, like you said, I had some trouble with the bike. We're on a trail, and it's kind of like a rocky trail. It's around a bend, around a corner, and so I had a flat tire. I brought my bike upside down to take the tire off, and my buddy as well. He's doing the same with his. He was having some trouble with his bike, so he's kind of doing the same thing. We're both kind of doing our own thing here for a second. I'm trying to repair my bike, so as I'm yanking on my tire, you have a water bottle that's in the water bottle holder on the bike. It's upside down, so that kind of shakes loose and falls, and it kind of rolls down a trail, or sort of around the bend. That's when I go and I reach down to pick it up, and I hear kind of like a sudden noise of like a tree branch. So that's when I basically stood up, and there it was. It was probably about 10, 12 feet away, and it was instant shock. I don't know how else I can really explain it. It was obviously, I've never, again, coming from Boston, we don't really have any wild animals or anything like that in our area. So I've never seen a bear or anything outside of a zoo before. So this was a total, definitely a shock for both of us.
Did you think it might be a bear when you first saw it?
No, I think we instantly, it was kind of odd because I think we instantly knew what it was, yet we had discussed later on that it was weird because we had never discussed Bigfoot to each other before in our life, or to anybody. So it was weird. I think it's like, it's just something that, people know about. I don't know how. I don't know. I don't know if like I said in the book, my first probably anything to do with Bigfoot was probably the Harry Henderson's movie.
Right. Okay.
It's weird. I think it's just something that people know about.
It's
somehow.
Sort of in the air. It's in the collective conscious. Yeah.
But we had never discussed Bigfoot before or anything like that. So we definitely knew. I mean, it was definitely, we knew right away it wasn't a bear. This was something that was definitely something new for us.
So it wasn't a bear. It wasn't a rather shaggy human. It was something else.
It was definitely something else, and it was. It was like I kind of, like I said, reference it in the book of kind of like your typical kind of Bigfoot thing is like, you see, it's really a mix between a human who would stand up, on two legs and like a big gorilla. I mean, it had both features.
And you see, so this is a rather large creature. It surprises you.
It was huge. Definitely between 7 and 8 feet tall.
That's big.
Oh yeah.
And not that far away.
Yeah. Oh yeah, pretty close. Initially, it was just kind of hiding behind a tree, but this was probably a very thin, small tree, so we could get a good look at it.
You said you were shocked. Were you? Anybody can be shocked by something that startles them. Were you then, after the shock wears off, afraid that this might attack you?
I think instantly we were worried about an attack. But it was kind of odd. I mean, it definitely happened so fast, but I think in the moment it seemed like it was, long and drawn out. But it was an instant, definitely shock. Now, again, my buddy who was kind of doing the same thing, this was like kind of, it's weird. It's on a turn on a ledge. So where my buddy was, he wouldn't be able to see from his perspective. So, I kind of stood up and motioned to him to come over. And as he slowly comes over, he witnesses what I'm seeing. And I think, probably initially you would run, but I think we kind of stood frozen. I don't know if it was so much in fear or just or what it was, but this thing wasn't attacking us. It wasn't coming at us or anything like that. It almost felt like it was as shocked and as scared of us as we were of it. So it was kind of an interesting, I guess, scenario there.
So maybe it came around a corner not expecting to see anything and saw you, and so you're both sort of frozen
possibly
for a moment or two. Okay.
Yeah. I never thought of it like that, but I guess you're right. You probably might have, when it was making the noise. Like I said, this area that we was on, if it had come kind of around that corner, it might have saw us or me at the time, and that's when it made that noise, and maybe we instantly might have seen each other at the same time.
It's a good thing that maybe that the bike had some trouble, or you could have run into this thing on the trail.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's also, we kind of look at it too. It's, you never want to have bike trouble when you're out in, miles away. But I think, we were kind of glad that this one happened, because it was definitely an interesting experience that turned out.
So it wasn't, from reading your book, though, I'd like you to go further, because this was not just a couple-second interaction. It went further, correct?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So tell us a little about what happened next.
So I think, at this point when we're kind of all, I guess you could say 3 of us just standing there, it was kind of moving behind this tree, and it kind of tossed something else at us, which, we weren't sure what it was, but it kind of clanged like a little chain. So we picked it up, and it turns out it was a keychain. So, this is all at the time, it's all very strange, but very, it was almost like it was curious, and we were curious as well. It didn't seem like it was out to harm us. It wasn't like some scary monster or anything like that. So it was, it's almost like if you see like a gorilla in a zoo or something like that, and it's like almost used to being around people. I don't think this thing was used to being around people, but it wasn't like didn't seem like it was looking to harm us. So it tossed this thing out at us, so we reached down, looked at it, and, we ended up kind of doing the same thing. We had a backpack that was full of, we had some bike tools, and we had some candy bars and, drinks and stuff like that. And so we grabbed a candy bar, and we both like broke off a piece. We each this thing was staring at us like it wouldn't take his eyes off us. So we both kind of grabbed a piece, took a bite, and we threw it kind of down in front of it, and it picked it up. And it definitely knew it had some intelligence for sure. I think it was mimicking us and as a way. So I think we were almost as curious as how it would respond to us, what we did, as it might have been of us that we look back now. It's like it was throwing something to us to see how we would react.
Right. So you're kind of in sync here. They're each mutually curious.
I think so. So at this point, it starts to kind of walk away. Now, it's almost in a way as if if you want somebody to follow you, or somebody's going to follow you, you start to walk away, but you kind of look back and say, it's like, are you coming? Let's go. So this thing had started to walk away, and it was looking back at us. We almost, I'm sure it was our curiosity, but we almost felt like it was trying to have us follow along. So we did at a distance. And we followed this thing into the woods, and now we're long off the trail, and it's through some pretty dense woods up there too. But we followed it, and kind of we had determined it was probably about a mile or so that we followed this thing. Again, it was at a distance, and we went up walking hand in hand with this thing by any means. But and also we're trying to keep up, because this thing can move pretty quick.
I guess it has a pretty big gait if it's that big.
Oh yeah, definitely. And also too, now going through the thick, like the brush, there's low trees. It's an overgrown area for sure, and so the bushes and the trees and everything. This thing could like walk through anything almost like unscathed, and we were just in shorts and a t-shirt, so we're like trying to ease through the bushes and stuff, and our bodies are getting all scratched up and everything too, and it was definitely more difficult for us to follow along, but we did, and so we followed it over to this kind of an opening, and it was like a pile of logs that it had come up to, and it had kind of there was a bunch of, if we had walked by, we would say, oh, this is just a pile of trash, but there was like, we almost, as funny as it sounds, we almost look like as if this is some sort of a collection of things that this Bigfoot had, been finding around the woods and almost collecting them for whatever reason. But it's just, again, like trash to us, beer bottles, and, we think there was like a t-shirt in there and stuff like that. But it was all definitely very interesting.
So you encountered it, you followed it for a good mile. So this is not a brief encounter. This is lasting minutes, maybe even a portion of an hour.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Bigfoot is aware of your presence and not concerned. Is that right?
I would definitely aware. It would kind of look back as we're following along. And once it had got to this area where, it kind of nails down. And no, actually, let me back up. We had, when we first had this initial encounter where we were, kind of tossing some things at it, we had a can of soda. So we tossed the soda over to him. We open it up and we take when we said earlier that it kind of was mimicking us. So the only thing we had left is we had in our bag was, some candy bars and soda. We didn't, this is all totally just random stuff. So we're just trying to see, what sort of interaction we could get with this thing. So we had the can of soda and my buddy, he takes it and kind of puts it on the ground, and we back up now to give it some room. And I grabbed this thing and kind of started to drink it almost. I know it sounds ridiculous, but So it had now when it had walked off, it had carried that empty can, and finally when we get to this clearing where there's all this junk, it's almost like it had put it into this pile as part of maybe an addition to this collection or whatever.
His
and at
hoard
that
of
point,
treasure.
that's when it. Yeah, at that point, that's when it kind of really, I wouldn't say ignored, but kind of wasn't so concerned about us being there. Well, we're still at a distance, but it was definitely more so aware of us up until this point. And then at this point, it was almost like totally fixated on this, these items.
So then, how did the encounter end?
Well, so now at this point, it's kind of messing around with these items, like I said. So now we're just kind of standing there in amazement. I obviously go in a lot more detail in the book than I can really probably get out in a short interview. But basically, as this is going on, so we start hearing some loud, noises coming at us, almost like if someone's running at you in a densely wooded area. You hear the sticks break, and it's a quiet area, so you start hearing the sticks break and the brushes moving and everything like that. Now, I mean, instantly the Bigfoot had got up and just took off, and that kind of shocked us too. It all happened very quickly. You hear this. Noise is coming at you, and we're looking around what happened. Then this Bigfoot took off, so of course we take off, and we're running through the thick brush and the trees again, and again we're getting all like hacked up. So we finally get to an area where we can kind of go behind a rock and ask ourselves what the heck is going on here. But at that point, now that was the end of the encounter. We had never seen it again,
So that's how it ended, and you didn't encounter it again after that, nor have you encountered any other Bigfoot after that, correct?
No.
Okay.
No.
This was a once in a lifetime thing.
This is a one-time thing, yeah.
So now, I don't want to spoil the other interesting things that are in this book. We've already given out a lot of the spoilers. So I'm just going to say that there's more to the story. There's a rather life-changing event for you that sort of is not connected to Bigfoot, but is connected to the timeline, correct?
Definitely connected to the timeline. Well, because now at this point, like you had mentioned earlier that we were lost. I don't think that we really had realized that we were lost until this point. Now we're like, all right, we kind of catch our breath and realize what's going on here. So let's get back to the bikes and get the heck out of here. So that was when we kind of determined, we don't know where the bikes are. We don't even know where we are. So
that leads to another adventure of getting back to civilization, which I'm going to leave for our listeners to check out and read for themselves, which is basically another interesting story. And then the interesting coincidence that happens after that, I'll leave that to our listeners to buy your book and read it. And again, it's the Day I Met Bigfoot by Craig Dorham.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I would encourage our listeners to check this out. There's more to the story. As juicy as meeting Bigfoot is, there is more to the story.
There is more to the story. I mean, this is kind of I do mention kind of the things that have happened since, and this is about 20 years ago, and it's not something that I went around telling anybody, and either is my buddy of mine, but I think it took a lot of convincing from a coworker over the years to finally to do it, because he's into it. He's into anything Bigfoot related. So, like, I wouldn't say I would ignore the story or tell the story. It's just I think back then, you tell like a few of your friends, and it's obviously like, yeah, sure that happened. So we kind of didn't really pursue telling the story to anybody. We thought about it. I think we thought, it would be a big deal until we kind of tell a few people, and I guess, like I said, it's all very skeptical. So we did kind of ignore telling the story for a long time until, like I said, I think it took some convincing and help from a friend of mine who thought it would be important to people who are looking for that information and, who aren't skeptic and really believe. So I guess that's why I finally did it. But I also think it did have a life-changing, life-altering, change in my life. And yeah, I think if you read the book, I think it's an interesting story. The rest of the adventure as well,
and a good one too. It'll
thank you. I appreciate it.
It'll make people smile, and it has a nice ending.
I mean, I'm to be honest with them. I've been getting seeing some of the reviews and things, and Amazon and things like that, and pretty shocked at the response it's got. I was telling, like I said, a friend of mine who tried to get me to do it, like, if I sold one copy, I'd be happy. I didn't realize that it was now that I see it online, there's a ton of these Bigfoot books out there. But I didn't realize, how many and how big it was. But I'm very shocked with the response, and it's doing pretty well. So I'm pretty grateful for all the people who have bought it and taken an interest.
Well, congratulations. I usually wrap up the interviews with a similar question. And what I find very unique about your story and you in general is you didn't go out looking for this, and nor did you pursue it much afterwards, because this is 20 years ago. The question I normally ask people is, because most of the people listening to this show are seekers and believers, and so we're all constantly looking for what's over the next hill, what's around the corner, what's the view once we get beyond that next ridge. And you, at least for 20 years, kind of left this story just as a story between an encounter that you and your friend had, and you didn't pursue it further. I'll ask you now that you've written the book, does it lead you back to some curiosity? Do you have a desire to revisit Mount Shasta or to explore the world of Bigfoot more?
I think I would. I would go back. I think more so now that, I see the response from the community that is into it and believes, and and you kind of get like a positive kind of effect from that. And I think that, since there are people who are into it and want to know, more information, things like that, then that does help to make it interesting. So I would totally be up for, going back. And, I don't know if I would ever find anything, and I probably couldn't find, so a friend of mine actually asked me, would you, it's kind of a similar question, would you go back to that spot? And I don't think I can necessarily find the spot. If you read in the book, you'll see we're kind of, we don't know where we were exactly. And I don't think any of us would necessarily be able to find that exact spot that we were at. But we would definitely make an attempt, But it is interesting. Now that, like I said, I see there is a lot more content out there, even, other stories and things like that. So it is interesting now that I'm actually kind of getting a little bit more into it.
Well, if you ever do go back to Mount Shasta, and you don't have to find anything, you don't have to find Bigfoot or even your old bike rusting out in the woods, but if you do go back, I'd love for you to check in and tell us how that experience was, just to satisfy our curiosity, and to follow up a little bit.
Definitely.
Craig, it has been a pleasure talking with you. I wish you the best of luck with the book, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Take care now.
All right, take it easy. Bye.
Well, believers, that concludes this episode of I Believe with Rick Rambleman.
Until next time, be sure to check out our website at hillcityparanormal.com, and thank you